Let's see. All right. Well, we are here with one of the OG Springer security guards, Mike O'Connor. Uh, Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I think it's going to be fun. I said earlier when we were just talking that I watched Pete Kelly's, I watched Steve's, and I caught Jimmy Sherlock's. And it brought back a lot of great memories. I haven't seen these guys in a long time. And it was just really cool to go back and listen to it, their stories, and even Pete, who is a pretty good friend of mine, since he moved. Well, I kind of moved first. I moved to California, and then he moved to Hawaii, and then I moved back, and I haven't been there to see him. So I don't think I've physically seen Pete Kelly in 10 years. I think
Wow.
it's gotta be. Jimmy Sherlock, even longer. Steve, I saw him last summer at his lake house in Wisconsin.
Oh, very neat. Very nice. So you guys still keep in touch.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, how did you get the job with the show?
So and tell me if I'm too loud too. I talk loud. It's probably because I'm around noise all day. But so Steve Wilkos and I were buddies, and he worked when we met one another. We kind of bonded because we were both Marines, uh, and we just became fast friends. At that time, I was on the hiring list for the Chicago Police Department, so a lot of my buddies were on the job. They were cops, and so we just started hanging out. Then we started working some clubs together. I did, uh, we called it bouncing back in the day, but I did door security at nightclubs and bars in Chicago from pretty much the month that I got out of the Marine Corps in 1990 is when I got out of the Corps. Uh, and I did that probably up until like 2003. I was still working doors. And so Steve and I were working doors together someplace. And I also used to live in his beat where he worked when he was on a job. And I think just like swung by one day, and it was like right after. And I watched his interview with you. He explained how, and I knew the story anyhow, but I think it was the Pinkerton security. Steve had like kind of came on. McDermott told him about that, and then he came on and he worked the day or whatever. So he called me and he said, "Look, I got this show, and I hadn't heard about it yet either." I know we all, everybody says, "Oh, I didn't hear it." No, I wasn't watching daytime television. I didn't know anything about it. And but because we had worked security together, he's like, I got something for you. And I thought it was just going to be like a one-time thing. And so the very first show I worked alone, and I didn't know anybody there, and I had to wear a suit and a tie, and I show up. Steve tells me before I get there, he's like, "Look, there's going to be this racist guy on." Turns out to be this kind of burly guy wearing, reverend's collar and the whole nine yards because some, I don't know, oh, sorry, some like church, right? You want to call it that. And but Steve goes, "Listen, introduce yourself to that guy and tell him what the deal is. He stays away from Jerry. If you get on the stage, you tell him to stop. You know, if he's getting out of line, you just tell him." So I get there and I check in, and then I ask where this guest is, and I walk into his green room, and associate producer is prepping him for the show at that point. I introduce myself. I tell him, I say, "Listen, I'm Mike O'Connor. I'm working security on the show today." And I said, basically, I told him what Steve told me to tell the guy. And turned it almost turned into a physical altercation between me and that guy. And the producer didn't know what was going on because I guess this doesn't happen, but because I hadn't worked the show yet, and I wanted, and Steve said, "Listen, you got to introduce yourself, but you tell this guy because we're worried about, we had everybody my age had seen the episode on the Geraldo show where the skinheads were on there, and it went crazy. This is when Geraldo had a daytime talk show. He actually got his nose broken in one of those in that one big melee. So my concern was that it could turn physical, and that's all right. Yeah, mix it up. It'll be fun, just like all the other guys would say. It's like that's par for the course. You don't work doors in Chicago and then get a fat lip every once in a while. It happens. Security, maybe it's not security getting a fat lip, but it happens, especially back in those days. So that wasn't the concern. The concern was, what do I do? What can I like? I know how to keep somebody away from a celebrity like Jerry. Um, but really, I don't know. I didn't know about like interacting with him during the show, and just didn't know. So it was, and this is all Richard Dominic's fault. I blame him for all of it. And I love the guy. It was fantastic. I mean, that guy was a great boss. Everything about him was great. And the show is what it became because of him. So I even had to meet him, and he just loved everything. He didn't care. He was glad that I riled up this guest before he even got out there on the stage. But at least I didn't, like I said, I didn't know. Was I going to rush the stage? I had to figure these things out. Like, and they said absolutely. If it was like we weren't worried about a fight with him, I think, on the stage, but we were worried that he might go after Jerry. So they're like, no holes barred. You do what you have to do to protect Jerry from this guy. I'm like, no problem. It'll be fun. And that was it. So that's how I got the job. And then, like all of us, I think after you work one show with Richard, if he thought you had, what it takes, and then you're invited to stay on. And that's literally what happened. He just said, all right, good show, and I'll see you tomorrow. I mean, it was something along those lines. And then worked with Steve to start scheduling future shows. So that's how that got started.
That's great. I think I remember this episode that you speak of. I remember in this the famous one where he and Jerry almost butted heads and you and Steve ran up on the stage.
I think so, yeah. So, right. So Steve made it there. Steve was working and he was worried he wasn't going to make that show. So he showed up. I don't know if it was like right before the show or something like that, but yeah. And if you watch closely on that show, that guy, like, back then I had a little bit more muscle, but I was never an inch taller than 5'8". And I was at my heaviest, I was 175 pounds. And when I grabbed this guy, I wrapped him from behind. And it's really funny. The guy was built like a bear, probably a 50, 52-inch chest or something. And when I grabbed him, he fully stood up and my feet were dangling off the ground because I was holding on to him. So I let go.
That's good stuff.
But yeah, it was funny. And you know, we'll circle back to it, but it reminded me of, I forget which security guy I watched. It might have been Jimmy Sherlock's interview, but one of them said that when they got backstage, you know, the guy said, oh no, it was Pete Kelly who he actually threw hands with, you know, and he said the guy, I said to him, Pete thought they were going to fight backstage again, and that guy said, yeah, how was I like that? Well, that guy did the same thing. He's like, was that good? You
Oh
know?
wow.
Oh yeah, because that was like that guy's thing. He was real, right? I mean, he's a racist, piece of
Yeah.
shit. And I remember he had I think she was 17 years old. I don't know if it was his daughter. I think it was his daughter, but I
Yeah.
can remember that. Um, I know that she had to be there with parental possession. She might have been 18. Let's just say she was 18. Maybe she was, right? But she was so coerced by this guy. I mean, this guy's it's what, they get their hooks into you. And if it's actually a relative of his, if it is his daughter, you can't run away from it. But I've thought about her because I felt so sorry for her. And I hope that she was able to get away from that guy and get on, with a genuine life that's not rooted in what that guy was preaching. Because it was,
Yeah. I read an article actually about that guy. I forget what his name is, but he had been arrested many times for, various crimes. Like I said, can't really remember.
right.
But yeah, I wondered that too when I saw the show. I was like, these girls are getting brainwashed by the day by
Yeah.
this guy, and I hope it wasn't too late, in the process for them
Right.
to see the other side.
absolutely. And all of them, like I remember that on the same show, similar show, that's the big when you got the Clans guys out there in the dresses and the whole 9 yards. And we get into this big melee. It's all out. That's when they had the stools behind, and it was just a big fight. There was a lot of people on stage. We had a lot of security, but I got one of them. I remember he was young. I was like when I was on the show, I think I was 25 or 26 years old. And I probably did it up until 31 or 32, something like that. But he was younger than me, there's no doubt. Um, but he had the uniform on, let's just call it that. He didn't have the hood and the whole 9 yards. So he's probably just wearing a black bomber and he had the uniform. And he had a mouth. And I remember like backstage, something had happened in some other segments, and he was, just a racist piece of shit, spewing all kinds of stuff, trying to get the audience, pissed off in the whole 9 yards. And anyhow, when we got back, when I tackle him, I slam him, like you see me disappear, uh, kind of behind the stage, below the stage. The stage is a little bit elevated, and I'm back behind it now. And I used area of his body to push myself off of him, so I could get back up. But the first words out of his mouth after I was nose to nose with him on the deck was, he goes, "I'm only 18." I said, "I don't give a fuck. What does that matter?" But it's, all the bravado was gone. And at the end of the show, the bravado was gone too. We'll come back to that. I'll tell you how that went. But a lot of it, it's all, bullshit. It's like, it's strength in numbers, right?
Yeah.
He's surrounded by everybody. But at the end of the day, that guy was just and I should think now as I'm 56 years old, so I should think of him as a kid. And we know now that, your frontal lobe's probably not done developing until you're 27.
Right.
Uh, hopefully they all did some growing up and got away from that, because that is a dead end life. Not only is it a terrible way to go through the world with hate, just hating somebody because of their religion or their color of their skin. It's just being tied to something like that, and being not thinking for yourself, and just being coerced and influenced by, predators. These guys are predators. That's why they get these kids when they're young. It's pretty hard to turn some normal human being into a racist when they're 30 or 40, but pretty easy to do when you're 13 or 14. And as we know, maybe up until the time you're in your early 20s. But hopefully all those kids uh, you know, learn something in life before they ended up going to prison, or you know dying, or whatever could be associated with that stuff. There's no good ending, right? I mean, what's the you know there's I mean, what they preach, what they want this race war. Well, that's all right, there's not going to be a race war, God
Right.
willing, right? Not in this country.
No.
Let's hope. So what's the end game? What is it? What do you get? So hopefully they left it. There's my
Yeah.
opinion.
I think some people just have to feel like they're superior to others. I mean, I just think that's
Yeah,
just what it is. They have to feel important. They're insecure within themselves, and they have
sure.
to use something like that to feel something. It's kind of sad, really.
Yeah. And also it's easy to blame, It's well, it's that dark guy's fault over there. It's not my fault, it's like you don't I think military guys, one, we like to say we're all green, just different shade of green. I mean, that's what we are. So, there's a brotherhood for sure, serving in the military and things like that. But I think most of these racists, I don't think that they were brought up in a multicultural society. A lot of them come from, you know, less, I don't know.
Developed
I'm trying
area.
not to insult anybody. I don't want to insult. I want to say, like, because you come from a small town, that you would be,
Yeah.
leaning towards this. But I think it helps to be. And having said that, you know, I think about all the guys I hung out with from the South in the military, or Native Americans that literally had, been raised on a reservation and they hadn't even been off. They hadn't been anywhere before. It's like once the military is a great thing that you meet everybody from all areas of the country and you have to work together. And you end up bonding, and military is really great for if you start off with these views, you can pretty much, get rid of them on your own,
Right.
and just by, you know, brotherhood and teamwork. That's it. You can't hate the guy that's on your right and left, especially if you're not, combat units.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I love that. There's a line that you had in that episode. I don't love the subject matter, obviously, but there's a great line. I think two audience members rushed the stage on that fight,
Yeah,
and you like found out who they were pretty quickly. And I remember you saying you were like Heckle and Jekyll, let's go, and you like escorted them out of there.
yeah,
And Todd Schultz was coming behind you on
yeah,
the like it was two of them, and they cut to this producer, this female producer that's standing over by where Richard would stand, and she's biting
yeah.
her nails. She is so nervous. And it
Right,
cuts away from her really fast, but she just looked like she wished she was anywhere but there.
right.
Yeah.
So, this is what, so those kids came out of the audience, right? Calling them kids, 'cause again, and well, and they stormed the stage. They were like part of whatever. They were there as fans, right, of the racist guys that were on there. And so it was them, and there was a couple other people. This is why I said I would circle back to like these guys. They're not so tough when they're not in their groups. Well, it was my job to remove them from the studio, remove them from the building. So at first we just removed them from the studio. And I forget where I took them to, but they were being watched. And then at the end of the show, because I wanted to find out what, if any, like I didn't know what they did, are we going to end up pressing charges against somebody, or, whatever. But once we figured out we were just going to let them go, I walk them, take them down the elevator, and I'm walking them out. Well, the audience is all going outside now too, and there was a group of, I think, a half dozen of them, uh, wearing the uniform, like I said, and uh, begging me, you can't put me out there. What are you talking about? Maybe I can't put you. You don't. Do you work here? I remember looking at the security, NBC Tower security. I'm like, you got a credential? You got one of these? Like I held it up. Yeah, employee, you got to leave. Well, the audience is out there. I'm like, yeah, the audience is out there. Should have thought about that, huh? What do you think? You're gonna leave the back door? Get the fuck out of here. And they were begging me. I opened the door. I said, listen, man, run that way. Just run that way as fast as you can. Maybe they won't notice you. Bye. Push them out the doors. I don't know what happened to them.
That's
So,
too funny.
well, little, justice.
Yeah.
Hey, deal with it. You want to throw around the N word, and well, percentage of the audience was black. Hey, sorry, you
Yeah.
didn't
Not
ask me
so
to do
tough
this.
now when you see like, I don't know, 50 audience members filing out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure that they just let them go. I mean, I'm sure they went running or walking away. Everybody else there is, doing the same thing. They're going back to their cars, or, grabbing a cab, or, yeah, there was no Ubers back then. So you're grabbing a cab or taking the bus or whatever. But either way, you're
Yeah.
in downtown Chicago. It's time to leave. Can't come in the building. So
That's
anyhow, that was kind
cool.
of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, there was another fight that I saw. This lady came out and boyfriend sitting in a chair and she slaps him and he gets up and he takes that chair and he throws it right in the audience, about hits Jerry.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I could see, I think you grabbed her and Steve grabbed him, but you had like the hair slicked back, you had this blazer on, you were like
Yeah.
not looking like a security guard at all. You look like you just came from the office, And I remember seeing that for the first time,
Yeah.
like did they not give them uniforms back then, or?
Right. No, if I was dressed like that, I think we went from sport coats and ties to sport coats. But oddly enough, I would come right from work. So a couple of those shows, and this is why you see me on so few. They would take 200 odd shows a year. Well, I couldn't do the daytime tapings. I could only do the nighttime tapings. And I think maybe they were taping 50, 60, 70 shows that I could actually work instead of the full 200 plus that they were taping. So um, I would come right from work. I'd get there as fast as I could. I think that the first evening taping probably started sometime around 5 o'clock or something like that, 4:30. We usually do two shows on each day. They're gonna film whether daytime or nighttime. So you do two shows. So one audience is leaving and another audience is coming upstairs.
So were you working the doors at the time, or were you doing something else?
Well, I had a full-time, yeah, a full-time job. So I was a suburban auxiliary police officer. I was on the hiring list for the Chicago Police Department. I didn't get called. Um, and then by the time I did get called, I had too many years invested at what I was doing. So I ended up working for a small marketing agency. And because of my background, I was Special Security Forces in the Marine Corps and then just regular infantry in the Marine Corps. Um, I think I kind of used that background to parlay my way into this corporate security. We ended up getting acquired by at that time the world's largest marketing company, and we migrated over, and then I migrated up into a corporate security role at this age. Now we're talking, 13,000 employees, offices across, a couple dozen countries, and I was in over my head. There's no lying about that.
Wow.
But I did that for a while. So yeah, so I was doing corporate security. And then Friday and Saturdays, I think like I said, I worked doors probably up until 2003 or 2000. Yeah, maybe four, maybe. I think I was finished with it completely 2004. And it was really because it just really did get in the way of work. When you're young and single, and I was at that time, it's I mean, for a good 10 years, I dated almost exclusively cocktail waitresses and bartenders and managers and, well, like, so it was a pretty good place and a couple of customers over the years that I met. But um, I think that that kind of, I didn't want to, it was fun. It was fun. And I made some, decent extra money, but I look back on it now, it was probably to meet the girls, so I didn't want to give that up.
100%.
Yeah.
I remember being that age myself. I was the same way. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah, it was
That's what
great.
it
I
is.
mean, I worked at some of the hottest clubs in the city too. I mean, no like tourist area. I mean, I worked at some places that were dangerous. I mean, the last big nightclub I worked at, I had to quit because I had a gun pulled on me, and I thought for sure I was gonna catch it that night, but it
Yeah.
didn't happen. Thank God. That guy ended up going to jail. uh,
Well, I mean, I'm glad it
yeah.
didn't escalate. I was going to ask, actually, that was my next question.
Yeah.
What was more tough, the Doors or the Springer Show? And
Oh,
like,
the
if
doors.
so,
Doors for sure. Doors for sure. Yeah.
so what was your craziest other than that? Like, was there ever like a big brawl that ensued that you had to be a part of
Oh
with the
yeah. I
Doors?
mean, there was some crazy. I mean, I was in fights where we were fighting, and I think we had probably at this one particular club, you know, 15 of us, 15 security guys, and it's the end of the night, and the lights are up, and it was a big nightclub, so we had a big capacity, and there was a fight in there, probably with about a dozen guys, one bigger than the next, and that was a bloodbath. I mean, it was just crazy. It was just guys fighting for their lives. And I don't know how it started. It didn't matter. I mean, when I came in there, I watched one of my buddies was getting choked out, and I carried a mag light back in the day, and I hit this guy so hard over the head with that was a C cell, probably 4C batteries. I hit him so hard over the head with that mag light that it bounced up off his head. I remember because the fight was over the dance floor and it hit like the lighting assembly up top. And when that fight was just about ended, so they were leaving. We were just trying to get everybody out of there at that point. I mean, it was like police were on the way. And when we got we had three doors that exited out, glass doors. And one of the guys, we called him Lurch because he was the size of a lurch. That guy was probably 6'5", 400 pounds. One of the guys were fighting. He went through the entire door because it was locked. It was a glass door with a bar. It was locked. The center door wasn't open. He went right through the door. And when he turned into the courtyard, because our nightclub had a courtyard, and then there were stairs that went up to the street, the cops were filing down, and this guy popped one of the cops right in the face. And then another one of their buddies hit another cop. And so the police couldn't tell who the good guys were and the bad guys. We were trying to help the police, but it turned into a melee with Chicago police. We had to, because again, they couldn't tell who security was. It's not, we weren't wearing shirts that said security or anything like that. I was probably dressed the way that you saw me on that show. I probably had a sport coat on because we had a dress code there at the club. And that was probably the craziest fight because it was it was a melee, and it probably went on for 30 minutes until everything was fully under control, until the police could figure out what was what. And a couple of those guys got arrested for battery on a police officer, assault, some serious charges. And even that, the guy that pulled the gun on me, which happened a little bit after that, by luck, it was just me and another security guy on the street, uh, Johnny Fernandez. I feel terrible. It could have been Hernandez, but I think it was Johnny Fernandez. But Johnny had worked the nightclubs in New York City. He was originally from New York, and he was out there with me. And it's a long story, so I won't bore you with it. But I had an opportunity to disarm the guy, and I disarmed him, and made him. He was very sorry for pulling a gun on me and Johnny, but he got a lot sorrier after the police showed up because there was a bunch of them there, and I remember the watch commander came up to me, the lieutenant, and because I was a part-time police officer and I had a badge and carried a weapon, I didn't have a weapon that night. I used his weapon, but uh, she had told me that he's going to be arrested for uh, an aggravated charge for pulling a gun on a cop. So, and he had like because he had sent it was three guys. He sent two of them go get a car, and he held this which turned out to be a 25 Beretta to my gut for probably like 5 minutes. So I'm thinking the whole time, you know, when this car pulls up, is this guy going to squeeze the trigger? And as soon as the car pulled up, he looked at it because it was right next to him on a curb. And I remember it was a two-door sedan or coupe. And the, the other asshole that was with him, instead of getting out of the car, he just leaned forward and kind of pulled the seat forward so that this guy could squeeze in and get into the back seat. And he was about to take a step to get into the car, and he still had the piece on me. And I had studied martial arts for a long time and did a little bit of boxing, and I, work indoors at this point for a long time. I just decided I'm not going to wait to have this guy, pump one in my belly. So I forearmed him and I caught him right across the bridge of his nose and ripped him down and took that weapon away from him, beat the shit out of him with that weapon, and then pointed it at the car. I had those kids get out of the car, and they did, and they ended up laying on the ground, and he got arrested. So when we charge him with, uh, pulling a weapon on a cop, he said as he was leaving it because they were fixing him. Actually, paramedics were working on him. He was sitting in the back of an ambulance, and he said that. So I walked up to him with the watch commander and notified him that he was going in for an extra bumped up felony. And he said, I should have smoked you when I had the chance. And two big cops, so many years gone by, they picked him up and they threw him in the back of a paddy wagon. And if anybody's from Chicago, we all know what happens on those paddy wagon rides. And that's what the guys told me. They said he's gonna regret saying that. And I said, all right. So I'm sure he was full of regret.
Well, sounds like he deserved it,
Yeah,
honestly.
he
I
did. He
mean,
deserved it. So that's the craziest stuff. That nothing like that's, the rest of them are just fight. Everybody gets into a fight. If you're going to work doors long enough, it's going to happen. But
right. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what was your most memorable, unless you've already told it, of course, like, is there a fight that really stuck out, other than the ones we talked about on the Springer show that you remember?
On the Springer Show,
Yeah.
uh, there's a couple. Let me see if I. So I can't remember it was a fight, but we had these cats on there called the Black Israelites. Maybe you watch this show. These guys, every one of them was the size of an NFL linebacker, bigger, and they were full of hate for Jerry. They Caucasians as a whole, and but these guys were really serious. These guys weren't they weren't asking backstage after the show, "Hey, how was I? How'd that go?" I can't remember the extent or what the beef was. There was something though, and these guys were militant and they were very serious. And it was Steve and I and Richard in a green room talking to them about something. And I think there was four or five of these guys, and it was about to step off. You know, it and I can't remember what it was, but it was serious. It was serious enough to where, Steve had mentioned to a producer, go ahead and call the police, because it's gonna get going. And I remember I talked to Richard afterwards. Richard, we had a fire extinguisher hanging on the wall, and he said he was going for that. And I said, nah, if I would have beat you to it. I mean, uh, and I can't. It never came to blows, but it was serious. Steve was nose to nose, and Steve's not a tiny guy. Steve's 6'4", and he was nose to nose with one of these guys, and I thought for sure it's stepping off. I thought for sure, but it didn't. Somehow it calmed down. I mean, even the camera guys, security guys, everybody, anybody that was there came to that room. So we were backed up, but literally like a sound guy and a camera guy and maybe an assistant director and everything is waiting for more, until the police actually got there. And we ended up getting those guys out. But those are again, hate-filled guys and that probably were a little bit more serious, I think, in their hate. I don't they could be a joke of an organization. I don't know. I think most of these hate groups are jokes anyhow. But anyhow, that one was the rest of them were just fights. There was a lot of them. Uh, we all got, friendly fire, I think. I think some, I'll call it friendly fire. We're slamming one another around but it was always fun. Like if you look at us, you could tell we're having a good time.
Yeah.
It was we're not hurting anybody either. So sometimes it's hard to separate uh two people that are really going at it without someone getting a little bit hurt. You might whether you got to put them in a wrist lock or something, but I never did that with women. And when the women would get their hands locked in to the mops of hair on the other people they were fighting, I mean, there was just clumps of hair all over that stage. I don't know if the cameras ever caught. I mean, clumps of hair, and the girls that had weaves in and stuff like that, just even more. I mean, it was a lot of like ripped clothes, clumps of hair. That was a pretty standard fight. I don't think the rest of them were just, you know, one serious one, but I don't think you'll see it. The guest was on the show. I don't think that this show ever aired for this reason, but this that was probably some cheating. I don't know. I wish I could give you detail on it. I don't know. All I know is that I think his sister-in-law was there to confront him about something. And he left the stage. And so when he left the stage, the cameraman followed him. Jerry went out into the hall, and I went out into the hall. Richard went out. And as we were filming, as the cameraman was filming, as soon as his sister-in-law, and I believe it was his sister-in-law, and I'm behind the guy, I'm right behind him. The camera's shooting this way. And as soon as the girl walked up and said something, he punched her right in the face. And I mean hard, knocked her out cold. And I immediately reacted and put him in a hold. And I can remember saying to him, like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? I mean, I couldn't believe it. That's the first time in my life I ever saw a man full on blast a woman in the face like that. And I felt this guy go numb or limp, I mean, as I'm talking to him. And so I choked him into unconsciousness and I let him flop down on the floor. I look at Richard, like I figure I'm done. Can't do that, you know. Plus, is he waking up? I don't know at all. Richard, get him the fuck out of here. So I dragged the guy down the hall. That was it. And I think we had that guy arrested. Oh, we didn't, but that's something else I would mention on these shows. If you get hit, you could file charges against the asshole that hit you. We can't stop that from happening, you know,
Right.
and that did happen. It happened more than once. I can remember going to the control room with cops that I knew because I knew a couple of cops from that district, and I remember like there was one cop, Aki, I knew him, everybody knew him, and he had to review the video because uh, this victim was no, I'm pressing charges. I'm pressing charges, and so somebody did get arrested. You can't do that anyhow. Most of them that are on the show, I mean, if you're there, you probably, unless you were kind of not clued in on what the show's about, I mean, you have to assume if you're going to be a guest there, there's going to be some surprise. There's going to be something. So I
Yeah.
think everybody kind of knew what to expect.
And I
Anyhow.
loved how Richard would also like step in there if they got
Oh,
too
yeah.
rowdy and help you guys out.
Yeah. That guy's great.
Yeah.
A really super cool dude. Uh, we got along really well. And I remember even when I left the show, you know, he he was trying to incentivize me to stay and things like that. I said, I just can't anymore. It's too much of a conflict with what I'm doing. I got to make a decision, you know, because
Yeah.
I ended up doing that security job really went to the corporate gig went to executive protection. So at the end of the day, I'm either shuttling, the CEO or some high end, the heads of some of our clients. There's a funny story. I can tell that later too if you want to hear it. But
Well,
part of my job would be, you know, whether I'm taking these guys to a private plane or I'm taking them to O'Hare or I'm just accompanying them to a meeting or, it was a couple of times I hung out with Jerry. It's the same thing. Yeah, Jerry really in Chicago, I don't think he really needed security, but a couple of times went out with him and really not really with him just so that he could, you keep everybody away and he didn't care if he was eating. That's just leave him alone while he's eating because he's super cool. He's going to sign autographs. He's going to do anything. It was similar like with these guys. Sometimes I did some waiting around, for him, but that's why so I was working during the day and then at night, I could make extra money, and I was very well paid back then, along with a company car and really everything that you get when you work for a really big company and you're working with the C-class executives and their client base. So that's how I ended up leaving because I always had something going on with the executives in one way or another.
yeah, I know Steve, circling back to the cat fights, I know that Steve had said he kept a hairball of all the hair he picked up from the
Sure.
stage, and he had it for a while, and I don't
Yeah.
think it made it to Connecticut when the show moved to Connecticut. I don't think that it made it. Someone had him to throw it out or something. But he said
Yeah.
it had gotten to be pretty big,
Oh, I believe it.
hairball of,
Yeah.
of
I mean, it was
hair.
everywhere. It was a smart thing kind of funny to,
Yeah.
collect that and pick it up because I
I
mean that was
remember
it.
I
Yeah.
remember another fight, and I pay attention to these details and stuff because running the Instagram page, I'm pulling footage from wherever I can find it, YouTube, other websites, and I'm watching to see if it's a good fight or not. And if it's not a really good fight, it's not going to go on there. It's not going to get the views. But if it's a good
Yeah.
fight, I want to keep it.
Yeah.
There was these two women, and it was you and Steve and Jimmy Sherlock, and they were going at it, and you and Jimmy got one of the women, and she starts biting at you guys. I don't know
Yeah.
what that was about. And you got up in her grill. You were like, I mean, you couldn't hear what you were saying, but you were like giving her the
Right.
business for doing that.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget. So that one made it on the page.
Yeah. There's a, and like I said, they were all, even if it looks like I'm getting serious or whatever, believe me, we're 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 laughing the whole time. And I was in the worst, by the way, I was in the worst seat for that. This is just a funny story. Goes with security. So Steve, likes to make me laugh, and he knows that I'm an easy victim for it. So there was a serious, and this happened more than once. There was a serious, I, from time to time, the show got a little serious, right? And so there was something poignant was happening on the stage, and where I would sit, if you're watching the show, I'm on the left, and Jerry would stand right next to me. So on a lot of the shows, Jerry would change position from time to time, but when he was here, you would just see my head. So if I started like this during a serious part of the show, if I start laughing or smiling, or I mean, people go back and they look now, they'll see a lot of this, and that's because Wilkos, you know, 10 seats over, is either sending messages, down my way, a note, or the person sitting next to me will bump me and I'll look over at him and then he'll just try to make a face. I mean, on this particular show, I literally filled my mouth with blood, biting my tongue so that I would not start laughing because there was something very serious. And I don't even want to, I remember the show and I remember who was on it now, but I don't want to poke fun at it. So I'm not going to. But that was Wilkos, And so, but that's how we went through the show. I mean, it was, uh, we just had a good time. It was, we know we're not going to get hurt. Nobody else is going to get hurt. Your ego might get bruised a little bit, but
Well, it's
your
good you
guts
guys
aren't
had
gonna
that
change.
camaraderie and everything.
Oh
It's like
yeah,
a
for sure.
fraternity of sorts.
Yeah, we were all buddies. We all hung out together, and we go to ball games together, and it was great. All those guys were great. We had such a great camaraderie, like you said, and a brotherhood. I mean, every one of those guys, Dan Pujar, and I don't want to miss anybody, but even Al Perales, and of course Mike, Jimmy Sherlock, uh, and Johnsons. There was two of them.
Johnson.
Yeah, Jimmy and one other one. I mean, I don't want to like skip any names, but every guy was great. We were all buddies, and of course, I was buddies with Pete Kelly, and then I knew Jason through Pete. But Pete and I hung out, and and this was after I think I started hanging out with Pete after I left the show, so I wasn't even on the show. But we became, we're part of the same clique. We rode motorcycles. We did all this. We just had a lot of things in common. So we all did it, and we became buddies, and we had a good core of guys. We were always like hanging out and laughing. That's a common thing, by the way. These guys, like if I say something about cops, right? Some of them, there's a bad apple everywhere, right? No matter what. But cops as a whole, the profession as a whole, has really, it's taken a black eye, but it's also taken, and some of it deserved, but as a department as a whole, or as a job as a whole, they're not, there's good cops, there's great cops, and there's bad cops. And hopefully the bad cops, and I believe this, are the minority. I think the vast majority of cops are good guys. And that's what I want to say about these guys. Every one of these guys was a great guy, friendly, always laughing, always smiling. These guys, that's the biggest thing I could tell you about all those guys. Were just constantly in a good mood, and and just solid guys, every one of them. So it was so easy to be buddies on the show and be buddies outside of the show. And I met almost all those coppers through Steve. Like Steve lived on the north side like me, but I know Jimmy's a south, believe he's a south side or anything. I know Pete is way south, the east side, but way far south. All those guys. And like in a city like Chicago, we're not talking, I'm talking, they might be 20 miles away from me in the same city. But, if you don't run in the same circles. So I would have never met a lot of those guys. A lot of those guys were north side guys too, but I met them all through Steve, all the guys except Al. I knew Al Perales from Working Doors, actually. Um, and then, but all the other guys I met through Steve, and we all became buddies. And they're just great guys. And I miss them. It's like going back and, getting ready for our interview and watching a couple interviews, just going down memory lane again. That's what I remember about these guys is like how much I liked to work with them and really just how what really good guys they were. Really like, you know, these weren't guys that were going to work, uh, you know, kicking the dog on the way out, and now they're going to take out, you know, their frustration, everything on the street. These were guys that were just level-headed, intelligent, smart, funny guys, but mostly just funny and just good-hearted. Every one of them. I can't say that enough. Pete Kelly, on the other hand, none of those.
So I went to the show. I went when they moved. I was too young, of course, when I was born in '94, just for context. So so I was way too young to go to
When I
like
started the show, I think.
yeah, yeah. So I
So,
was too young to go in the heyday. I wish I could have went to one of those shows. But I went in 2013, and that was the year actually that Pete got injured and left the show.
yeah.
But I went in the beginning of the year when he was still there, and that's when I met him in person for the first time. But I took my mom to a taping, which she was like, "What the fuck, Mark? Why'd you take me to this shit?" Like,
Right. Right.
but no, it was great to finally meet him because we had corresponded on Facebook because I had started the security page originally on Facebook
Yeah.
and had gotten a bunch of them to follow and had actually gotten, about 5,000 likes and had a lot of interaction, and NBC shut me down 3 times. So
Yeah.
after 3 times, I said, I'm just going to go to Instagram and, you know,
Yeah.
but that's how I mean, I did eventually get to go to the show and see everything. And so I was glad I got to do that. I actually roasted one of the guests during the Q&A.
Oh yeah.
I feel like I got the real, the full experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's and then so you see like how, you know, we're watching a commercial on TV. Well, there's like a 15-minute break. They're changing, furniture around, they're bringing out other guests and they're prepping Jerry and, all the other things that happen. And it's it's it was definitely interesting. I did the same thing. I don't know if I can't remember if I brought my mom, maybe not, but over the years, it became a hot ticket there for a while, and people wanted to get into that show, and so over the years, I don't know, I probably had a dozen or 2 dozen guests there, and they always had fun, and then we could strategically seat them too, you know well, at least we called it back then the hot seat. And the hot seat again would be like just good looking women or people where
yeah,
Jerry's gonna stand. So a little eye candy around there. I like to think that's why he stood next to me in the front
of
row.
course, of course.
Right.
Especially when you had the blonde hair in the later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had all kinds of different colors of hair. Now it's
Yeah.
very like there ain't much left, but I need a haircut, so that's why I got my hat on today.
Oh, no problem. Actually,
Yeah,
Pete gave me this shirt when I came to the show, so I'm wearing the
yeah, yeah.
official security. And I remember, you know, I didn't tell him I was going to come to the show. I didn't think that he would really care that much, but actually he did because when I walked up to the stage, he was standing there kind of ushering the audience out, and Jason Brandstetter was standing there. And Jason's like, the exit's this way. I said, no, 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 I want to talk to Pete for a second. He's like, okay, cool. So Pete recognized me immediately.
Yeah,
And with that thick accent that he has, he
yeah.
goes,
No.
why didn't you tell me you were coming to the show? I'd have got you your front row. And I was like, I was
Yeah,
like, well, I didn't know that that was something you would do. But
yeah.
yeah, so we had a great talk, and I do some acting, and he at the time was also doing a lot of acting, so we bonded
Yeah.
on that too. So it was great, and I wish I could have talked to Jerry a little bit more. I always
Yeah, he
wanted
was a
to go
great guy.
back,
Yeah,
and
really.
then they canceled the show when I had made this plan to go back up. They announced they weren't going to be doing another season. So, but I'm glad I went the one time.
Yeah, you got to catch it. You know what it was all about.
No, did you ever have any audience members who tried to get go out with you or anything, or any guests that tried to hit on you or anything?
Uh, I don't think I had, yeah, I don't remember that, but I did have, I don't want to wake up any sleeping tigers here or anything, but there was a couple of fans went a little too far with uh I guess we'll just call it a crush. I guess a couple of them had a crush on me, and that it started with, initially just like fan mail letters to the show, and I even did some phone calls. Linda Shaffram would set that up because they're like super fans, and makes their date. I always thought it was ridiculous. And, to talk to Mike O'Connor, let alone I'm signing headshots at some point too, which again, I asked myself, I'm like, where is that? Like, am I ever gonna like walk into some house and see my headshot hanging up in there? It's like, no, we kept these so stupid. And he's like, who is that guy? Um, but it always felt so, I think of it in autographs. I signed like parking stubs or whatever. It was like so stupid. I'm not a celebrity, not at all. And but anyhow, so that kind of stuff, yeah, was fine. But it turned into with one, she found out where I worked and where I lived, and started showing up at both places. So she showed up at when she showed up at my office building downtown and had made it to reception. She was inside, and I was told that she was there. Well, me being head of security, I looked at the video to see who was out there. I wasn't expecting anybody, and I didn't recognize her, but it had hit me that that might be the person. So I asked. They had something for me. That's what it was. They were dropping something off for me, and they wanted to meet me. They acted like they knew me or something. So reception just said that I was in a meeting and that I can't be disturbed. I can't come out. And then after she left, she left a bag and a card. And when I opened it up, it was the stalker that had been sending me letters to my house. She created this entire fantasy world where her and I were a couple. And she would write these, I mean, pages and pages long. Uh, they weren't love letters. They were more like Pulp Fiction. They were like some weird, just like fantasy story that had me in it. And, I don't think I never felt threatened, obviously. You know, I didn't feel threatened. I was concerned though, and we had to stop that. So I know I worked with Linda. I don't know what we did there. I did something along my side just to make sure she couldn't get into the building again. And then I'm just worried about like, where is this gonna go? Like, and she, how did she figure out where I lived? You know, but again, I wasn't worried about somebody being at my front door because I owned a condo downtown, and I was several floors up. And again, you got to get through a doorman, you got to have a key fob to get into the elevator and all that. Um, but it was weird. I found a gift on the windshield of my car when I came out after I was eating at a restaurant, and I'd left, and there was a gift, literally on like gift wrapped gift on my windshield. She must have just put it there because how long will something like that stick around in the city? But that was the weirdest thing. Um, and the rest were just like, you know, someone, thought I was cute or whatever. It was like big deal. And there was a couple of guys out there too. Sorry, guys. I'm flattered, but it's not my thing. But I'm flattered. And I probably had more gay fans than
Yeah,
than girls, if you want to know the truth. But no
yeah.
one that ever really like bothered me. And so no, long story around, I never dated a guest. I hung out with a couple of guests, um, but nothing like that, not romantically. I did meet a couple of women from the audience that I ended up, taking out, but That was just, you whatever. If I don't see a wedding band and I don't have one on, like I said, I was in my 20s. So, like, hey,
Fair game.
you want to meet Jerry? Want to get an autograph? Want to see
There
his
you go.
office?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen some of Pete's fan mail that he's posted
Yeah.
from guys, and it's just some weird stuff out there.
Yeah. 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 There was no, like, there was no social media back then when I was working. It's probably a good thing, you know,
Yeah,
because then my address would have been published, right? Everybody would have known it and would have gotten a
true. Well, I
bunch of,
wonder if she found it through either following you one day home
yeah.
or like maybe the phone book. Did the phone book put addresses
No,
in
and
it?
she wasn't local. No, and I was always unpublished because I worked in security. I mean, I wanted to make it, so that I wasn't that accessible. But um, yeah, I I don't know. I don't know. I wondered that myself at the time. It bothered me more. I'm trying to figure out how, but you know, if you never know. She might have called into the show and she just got lucky and she got somebody, and she might have said that she wanted to send. Who knows? I mean, I don't know. I really don't. I'm thinking the only way she could have gotten it. I mean, you could hire a private detective. You can hire, there's even back then there was ways to find somebody, and maybe she had in Chicago it was super easy back then. I mean, very easy. If you had a friend on a department, and I did, you know, you could you can get anything. You can find information on anybody. Now there's a digital footprint. If you do, if you're searching for someone's address or name or something like that. But back in the day, if I had a license plate, if I had a name, I could get anything I wanted, you know. And obviously, I wasn't doing anything illegal with that stuff. But maybe it was that simple. Maybe she knew a cop or she knew somebody because all you really needed was a name and you run somebody through a database or whatever and you can get an address. I'm a registered property owner. I pay property tax in Cook County. So, my name's going to come up to my address and maybe it's as simple as that. And that's how she got it. But it was, yeah, it was weird. I remember I wasn't flattered by it. Let's just say that, you
Right.
know.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad that I'm glad, I'm glad she finally stopped because that would have been annoying after a while.
Yeah, for sure. That's the
And
way
I've
I think.
seen,
Well,
what's that movie? Is it Fatal Attraction? Yeah, that's what
yeah,
I'm thinking about right now.
yeah,
Next thing you know, a
yeah,
rabbit's in the pot
yeah,
or something.
exactly. Boiling a bunny. Uh, yeah, and I know that I did talk to her, but at the show, I think Linda had set that up as like, some sort of super fan thing or whatever it was. Like we did a lot of that stuff. I did a lot of early morning radio interviews, morning zoos all over the country. Linda would set that up and 6 a.m., maybe some DJ in San Diego or Cleveland or anywhere would say, hey, I got Mike from the Jerry Springer Show, security. And, Todd did more of those. I think Steve did more of those, but I did a bunch of them, including like a live, Mancow. Mancow was a DJ here in Chicago, did his show. And we hung out too. Steve's got a funny story about that. We were at Mancow's. Maybe I'll tell that story. Maybe I won't. I don't
Yeah, I'd
care.
love to hear that. That'd be great. And I'd
No.
also like to hear the security story you were talking about. You said you would tell that story if I wanted to hear it.
Which security story again?
Not from the show, from the corporate security gig, like the executive protection, somewhere along that line.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So that one. So we took. I forget what year it was. It might have been 90. I don't know. It was in the 2000s, early 2000s. Somebody'd have to look this up. But the Super Bowl was in Miami, and I was there with the executives, and we were staying at the Delano in South Beach, and a sporting goods executive was going to be our guest at the Super Bowl. So he flew into Fort Lauderdale, and I drove to pick him up. And we're coming back, and we're stuck in traffic going over the causeway to get to South Beach. And it's crazy. I mean, just any Super Bowl cities during Super Bowl weekend is just it's a madhouse anywhere. Miami, South Beach, especially, is already crowded, right? And so traffic's not moving. And he's just right in the passenger seat. He's not like in the back or anything like that. And it's just I think we're like Cadillac was one of our clients, so we had Escalades and everything there. And I wasn't in an Escalade. I know I grabbed one of the sedans. And the executive says, I think that these girls are trying to get your attention and we're just stopped in traffic. And he puts the window down and they start chanting Jerry, Jerry. So, oh my God, you're Mike. You Mike? And I'm like, yeah, hi, yeah, I'm Mike. And and they're going crazy, I mean, it's like they didn't have cameras, and again, we didn't have smartphones back then, so nobody's video. They're just like, oh my God, where are you staying and all this and that. Oh, this is Mike from the Springer Show, and finally I had to start driving again. I said, well, thanks, yeah, thank you, bye. And he puts the window up and he goes, you were on the Jerry Springer Show? And I go, no, no, like I was a guest. And I said, no, I used to work security on the show. And so that's why that was funny because this guy was the CEO of like one of the world's largest sporting goods companies. And he was impressed. I
Yeah,
think he loved it. At first he was like taken aback, like I was a guest. Not that I'm not slamming guests, but I was never a guest
yeah.
on the show.
Big difference. Big difference.
Yeah. So that was funny. And I got recognized TSA. I'll say it's 90% of who recognizes me as TSA. And I had probably happened like 4 or 5 years ago. Is that recent? I mean, and I say that I'm like, how the like I don't even look anywhere near the same. How can you even remember you? I remember you. It's just like, and they say, you're Mike from the Springer Show. Back then it always used to happen. I mean, always. We were, you don't realize how popular you become and in flying for the show, and I got some. That's we can get to that story too. My story that might come close to Jimmy Sherlock's story. Not that gross though. Pretty gross, but not that gross.
Of like
Um,
flying out for to find guests.
we would guard producers. We would go with producers to certain. So that's why um, I don't know where Jimmy went. I didn't see the horse episode, but I think he had to go to where. My understanding is he had to witness something happen. And I thought that that would have happened remotely. I didn't think they had the horse on the show and let it happen
Oh, they
there. But
did. Yeah, that
oh,
episode
they did.
never
Oh
aired. They
wow,
thought it was too weird.
yeah. Um, well, anyhow, we can get to that, and I'll tell you mine. But I can remember like on that. So I would fly with a producer, and we would go to in this case this was in Los Angeles, but I'd gone to a few different places. Schenectady, New York was another place I went to, and two trips to California, one trip somewhere in the Midwest. I can't remember. There was, one was in Florida. Because they went to go interview a guest and they thought that they might need security, then one of us would, we would split it. We'd see like who could do it, who couldn't do it. And so, there was a few times when it worked with my schedule or I could take a personal day and I could fly out somewhere and accompany the producer and the cameraman. And we're just there to make sure that, the producer's protected. That's really what it was. Yeah.
So, what was the man cow story? I'm curious.
You're gonna have to edit this down because it's just too long. But I'll just tell you this. So Mancow had a show, and it was based in Chicago. And although I think that at some point, I don't know if it was syndicated, I don't know if it was a national show or not, but it was Chicago based and he lived in Lincoln Park. Anyhow, it was a Monday or a Tuesday night and he had, it was a weekly meeting with his producers, his co-hosts, everybody there, and they come up with ideas for the show. So it's like a planning, meeting. And they would do this once a week. And so Steve and I got invited to it, and I was there. And I remember we ordered, uh, Chinese food, and we're just kind of like listening to these guys talk. He had an amazing apartment too, or condo. I mean, like he collected movie memorabilia, and there was just stuff around every corner. There was like costumes from horror movies and stuff hanging, just really cool stuff and collectible and I'm sure very valuable stuff. Um, and he had some funny masks, and I don't know where the masks came from, but they all had they were either rooted in film or a TV show or something because that's what he collected. And anyhow, they start smoking pot. So let's just get to that story. Now, I was not uh, a pot smoker at that time. You know, after I moved to California and stuff, it's different. Started surfing. It's a different lifestyle. And it's legal. So it's legal in Illinois now too. But at the time, it would still be considered an illicit drug. And I remember that when they offered me a hit on a bong, I had never even smoked a bong. And I said, yeah, why not? I mean, I have a meeting tomorrow, a very important meeting. I'm giving a disaster recovery briefing to all of the company's executives that had flown in, the facility managers and the human resources people from New York, from Paris, from London. They're all in town for other meetings because this is probably post 9/11 is what I'm thinking. It might not have been, but it was probably sometime around that. But anyhow, these meetings are very serious, and my part as the corporate security director is to then give my presentation on disaster recovery and how it affects them. How do you keep the business running if something like the Twin Towers go down? There's businesses in there. So you have to have a plan. That's disaster recovery. Where do you set up desks and computers and people, and how do you have to figure out who's dead, who's alive, all this stuff. So it's very serious. But that's the next day. That's the following afternoon. I'm gonna smoke some weed. I'm gonna be all right. It's gonna be fun. And I can remember Steve making jokes and laughing at me. He's like, man, look at your mouth on that. He's like, I bet you're wishing that was a glass dick. Don't you? You probably think that is. And he's just like, what are you doing? You don't smoke pot. And I'm like, I can if I want to. What do you care, Dad? Leave me alone. And I end up hitting that bong like 5 more times. And I mean, it hits me. I thought that I had been drugged. I thought that there was PCP in that. That was that high. I was wasted and totally paranoid. And I remember looking at Steve right as I'm feeling this coming on, and I'm like, we got to get out of here. Gotta go. Gotta go. I gotta go. Get me out of here. Come on. Gotta go. And he's like, you ain't going nowhere. This is great. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I think I'm this. Next thing I know, like Mancow's got one of the masks on. He's dancing around in the background. And I'm like, fuck, am I hallucinating or is that what is that? And Steve won't let me leave. And it just getting worse and worse and worse. I probably had 5 beers in me at this point, too. And I am destroyed. And this story's been out there because Mancow talked about it on his show. Even though I asked him not to talk about it, my brother was being interviewed on the show for something else. My brother's Paul is a Chicago firefighter and a boxer, and like Pete would do battles of the badges, and as well as what's wrong with me? Pete's partner,
Jason.
Jason. I know Jason. I was just having that old guy. And so my brother would box for the Chicago Fire Department versus Chicago Police Department or New York City or Boston or whatever. And so my brother was on there getting interviewed. He was also captain of the boxing team, the fire department boxing team. And he's he's just promoting it. And it came up because I think my brother, Mike. And then Mancow starts talking about that. And my brother, I was listening to my brother, and my brother's kind of like nervously laughing. Goes, I don't think my brother wants that public. I don't think my brother wants you to talk about that. And he's like, what are you doing here? He's like, sticking up to your brother or something like that. My brother's like, yeah. He doesn't want you talking about that. He's ruining his interview by telling Mancow, like, shut the fuck up, man. What are you doing? You don't get to share this story. But I told my brother, I said, don't worry. I don't care. I don't care. But what had happened is I was so wasted that I couldn't drive. Steve uh, Steve drove me home, I believe. Yeah, that's what it was. And then took my car out to the suburbs where he lived. And I woke up. So the meetings the next day started probably like 9 o'clock right on the button, right? And I think I was up at like, was my turn like just after lunch. That's what it was. So I didn't even wake up until 10 o'clock. And I mean, I'm getting messages from the CEO, like, because I was supposed to pick him up probably at 6 a.m. And then we would go to East Bank, we'd work out, we'd have breakfast together, and then I'd take him to the office. And that's how our day started. Well, I didn't show up, and I didn't answer any calls, and I didn't answer any messages. And I was still wasted at 10 a.m. Wasted. There was no way. I was paranoid. I was still, everything I was going through at Mancows was still happening to me. And I remember I called up the executive assistant to the CEO, and I said, "You got to get me. I can't do this presentation. I can't. I can't. You got to say, you say no. You like people came in from all over the world. This is not good. You got it." And I was honest with her. I told her why. She goes, "You sound fine. Don't worry about it." Yeah. She goes, "It's all in your head." So I remember I called Steve. Steve can't get my card down to me in time, and I need that. It was a Yukon XL, and again, part of my job would be to take some executives back to the airport or whatever, and then it's, and so I told Steve, I said, "Dude, I need that. I need you to come into the city." You know, he's like, "Well, I can't right now," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I need that. I need that car." So I don't think that we ever got the car. I was able to push off the meeting because I had another car that I had access to, and I ended up driving one woman to the airport. Um, and I got them to push it to 2:30. I think I was supposed to do my presentation right around 12:30 or 1 o'clock. I just every minute I was trying to sort, and I had stopped smoking this weed at 9 p.m. that night. That's when I think I stopped. And at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I am still wasted. I mean it. Like I feel like I shouldn't be driving. I feel like all this. I'm like, I can't believe what did I do? And now I'm gonna stand in a conference room with 30 people looking at me as I, go through my slideshow and my presentation. And I remember getting there and I said to the executive assistant, I know everybody's name. I'm just leaving them out of this. Uh, I said to her, I go, "Come on, how do I look wasted? I mean, can you tell by looking at me? Can you tell?" She's like, "You're fine. You seem like yourself." And I'm like, "I'm not. I'm not. I'm crawling out of my skin right now. I'm not myself." And she's like, "You're fine." And I did the whole thing. I remember I started sweating a lot during it, but I made it through my presentation. So that's the funny story, all wrapped up. Uh, didn't know how to smoke pot. Now I do. I'm
Yeah.
very good at it. That does not happen. It's never happened again. And and I don't think it ever will. One, I
Yeah.
think I'm too used to it now for it to happen. But
We all
uh
have those first time stories. That's what
yeah,
makes it
that was
fun.
yeah. I mean, first time story, right? I mean, because I was a jock. I was just that guy growing up. I mean, I I really didn't start smoking weed until my late 20s, you know. And then I stopped. I didn't do it again until I was 37. And then that's when I moved to California, and that's when it became a ritual, at least like one little hit before the paddle out. So 6 a.m., just taking a toke, that's it. It just like makes the experience all that much more beautiful. And it just became like, it's a ritual. I'm not the only one. Everybody. And
Of
it's like,
course. I mean, you can't drive down the interstate now without smelling
yeah,
it. So
I
it's
know.
everywhere.
Well, I'm a general contractor now, and that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. And when I'm in Home Depot now, I can always tell somebody you just got off break, because
Yeah.
I go, I recognize that scent, So I think it's happening everywhere now. You shouldn't be. I don't think anybody should be smoking pot during the day at work, but
Yeah.
you know,
That actually
people are
reminded
straight
me.
drinking. Drinking, makes people an asshole. Weed just makes everybody kind of mellow and cool.
Mellow out, right? And more people should be doing that than drinking.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this wasn't my story, but my grandmother, the most pure person you ever met in your life, very like never curse, never drink, smoke anything. I had this cousin that came over on his lunch break and he said, I just need to go to the bathroom. And she said, he was in there forever and then he left and I'll see you next time. And
Yeah.
he calls my aunt up on the phone and she goes, I think you need to come over here. There's a skunk under the house. Like it's sprayed and we need to come and we need to call
I
somebody.
love it.
She says, okay. So she comes over there. She goes in
Yeah.
the bathroom. She goes, who the hell's been smoking pot in here? She's like, what are you talking about? She said, nobody would ever do that in my house. She said, well, somebody did. She said, who came here today? She said, well, cousin's name. And she said, oh my God. She's like, he's the biggest pothead in the family. She's like, what do you mean you don't know? She's like, well, I thought it was a skunk. I can't believe he would do that.
That's
Yeah,
so
he went
funny.
in there, smoked a
Yeah.
joint, and flushed it down the toilet.
Yeah.
So, but it was just like mind blown. She just could not believe that somebody
Yeah.
had done that. Yeah.
It's so funny. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
not
well, it's
used to
like
go
I
for it.
remember sitting with my father-in-law, and my father-in-law did not smoke weed. He's an artist, really, I mean, an exceptional artist. He actually raised his family on his on art. So he was a working artist and a gemologist. He made beautiful jewelry and everything. This is when I was living in Orange County, California. And his buddies, and he was in his 70s, and at this time, early 70s. But his friends from his childhood, all retired guys. I remember one of them was with a Bose stereo. He's a retired Bose executive. As a matter of fact, he like set me up, gave me a bunch of like super highly collectible Bose stuff from like the 60s and 70s, just because I was a fan. He saw like my system, and I'm like blown away. As I got this really cool stuff from him. Um, but so he would have like guys' night, barbecue, sit around, drink a nice Beaujolais. But then one weekend, his buddies show up, a couple of them that are pot smokers. And again, this is like where I'm from. You're not sitting around with your father-in-law smoking pot. You're not. I don't know anybody sitting around anybody smoking pot. But in Southern California, it's no big thing. It just isn't. And but Herb did not smoke. And I can remember when his buddy, but he didn't care. His best friends that he's been friends with for 60 years are packing a bowl, and they go, "Hey Mick, you want some?" And everybody calls this my nickname. "Hey, Mick, you want some?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, I do." And like I remember her going, "Mick doesn't smoke that crap. Only you potheads do. He doesn't." I'm like, "Yeah, that's right. That's right." Now, my quote unquote, if you could have a stepfather-in-law, Jacques, that guy was badass, and he had the best weed. And I sat around, I smoked a lot of weed with that guy. I miss him. I'm divorced. I miss him. I miss my father-in-law. I miss my ex-brother-in-law. Miss my ex-wife a little bit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, they were all friends. Just like I talked about the cops, we were all buddies and hung
Yeah.
out. My in-laws were like that. Just yeah, they were my family. I had a
That's
great
great.
time.
It's good to have that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask one more question before we wrap this up.
Yeah, and I want to tell you, you got my crazy story, right? The one I
That
said.
that's the one I wanted. Yep.
Okay, there we
That was
go.
my question.
All right. Okay, so get a trip to go to California, and I'm told that there was we had a porn star on the show. I don't remember, there was more than one, but I think I remembered one named Houston. I think that was her stage name. And but I don't quote me on that. It might have been somebody else because I can't remember. But if you got to change, I'm just going to tell you what they called. They called it a gang bang off. Gang bang off. So I traveled to Los Angeles, and I know Annette was there. I don't know if Annette was still with the show, but I hung out with her. She was living there. She had a house there for sure because Annette Grundy and I are still friends. And I know we went out to dinner. As a matter of fact, we went to the Ivy, a very hard table to get even back then. And I I woke up feeling like I thought it was a cold. It turned out to be the flu, really bad. And God, as the day went on, it got longer and longer. But this is when I find out really what the show's about. So the show is 50 guys off the street, random guys, get to have sex with this porn star, and it's going to be filmed. And so we're there, do testimonials and all this. So I am, I tell you, I got ill because I'm just feeling like shit, right? I really am. And it's getting worse and worse. I'm running a temperature. I can't call in sick. I got to be there. I'm there really just with the producer of the show. And I forget her name. I can't remember which one. We had, you got your coordinating producer, senior producer, executive producer, and then you got your segment producers. And I just don't remember who it was. And I feel bad. But again, this is a long time ago. Um, but I'm there to like protect her in case anything happens. And it was really hilarious. So when we get there, even though I'm feeling sick, you just forget about that. I'm there to work now. Now I'm going to work. I'm feeling like shit, but it just made the experience that much more annoying. Um, we get there and I meet so we're somewhere in the valley, San Fernando Valley, which is where all the pornos are made there in Southern California. And we're on a sound stage and we're going to the back and we meet the guy that owns it. It's right out of Central Casting. He's some Italian guy from New York City, got the accent, he's got the pinky ring, he's got all the pictures and autographs and everything of every performer. And he's just oozing New York outfit, New York mafia. I think he wants that too. He wants that. But think there's some legitimacy. That's who's in this business. That's who's in this business. So back then at least. And so he was complaining about only 45 guys showed up with their HIV tests. You had to get an HIV test. Now they sent these guys to the doctor to get this screening, right? Because nobody's using a condom. And there's 5 guys that show up. They need 50, and there's 5 guys that show up and they don't have tests. So somehow, some way, in about 25 minutes, these guys had confirmed tests. So I guess they were HIV free, you know. And again, this is 90 something. This is not, you're not getting your test back in 2 minutes. That wasn't going on. So that's how that started. Now you have to picture, and this is why I say mine is worse. They're interviewing a cameraman. You got a cameraman, you got a sound guy, you got the producer doing the interview. I'm in a room full of 50 naked guys. It smelled like a fucking a, a kid, like a gym locker times 50. There's just all these guys, some of them homeless, guys right up off the street, right? All standing around pulling their junk because they're trying to stay hard because they're going in 5 at a time to have sex with this porn star and it's being filmed. And Ron Jeremy is dressed in a tuxedo and he's doing play by play like it's a Ron Jeremy. He's in jail right now, but he was a famous porn star from the
I know.
70s. So he's there, he's the MC, he's hosting it, he's doing play by play in the tuxedo. And everything about it was just super gross. It was very disgusting. And just these guys standing around, and I was there for 6 hours. So for 6 hours, I'm standing there with just surrounded by men, literally standing there naked, tugging on their wieners, trying to be hard or stay hard. I think this might be pre-Viagra or whatever. So, um, and they're getting interviewed. So I'm around that. I don't want to watch what's happening to this woman. And there was more. There was like a couple other porn stars. They decided to get in on the act, and then she decided like everybody's going to do anal, and so this is what we're going to do now. And so guys would go out there 4 or 5 at a time because you can't have 50 guys on all at once, and they don't want one guy. They want to try and speed this along. So those guys are doing that, and the producer is we're backstage now interviewing guys that are there. Now, a lot of these guys are wearing disguises. They're all naked. Some guys are just wearing like, tube socks and that's it because the rules were you gotta be naked. And they're naked, but they're wearing masks. And one cat had a Phantom of the Opera mask on. And we're interviewing him backstage and he doesn't have the mask on. And the producer says, what's your name, your address, and spell it. So that's implied consent. If you're doing that, if you're giving somebody your name, that's the reason. So you can go back and say that everything that you said was willing. And I think something was said to him, but he does the whole interview with the mask off, talks about like, why, and he might be on the show. I don't know. Um, like, why do you want to participate in something like this? But when he gets done with the interview, he says to the producer, and this is why they have people like me there. Um, hey, you're not going to show that. You're not going to use that, are you? And like, well, we might. It's not up to me, but if it gets edited, no, 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 you can't. No, you can't. She's like, well, you gave permission. You're on this thing. No, I'm wearing a mask. I'll put the mask on. You interview me again with the mask on. No, you can't. I'm married. I have this job. I have that. You know. And the girl said, I'm not going to make you any, like Mike. And I'm like, hey, you heard her. That's it. And the guy got like, you're going to ruin my life and all this and that. And I said, listen, man, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it. Forget it. They probably won't even use it. It doesn't matter. Just you got to relax though. Cause he's like, no, I'm not going to relax. I'm like, listen, I met the guy that runs the show here. I'm not the guy that's going to throw you out here on your ass, but I guarantee you, I will get you dumped out of this place in 2 seconds flat. If you don't shut up right now. Walk away from her. Get your clothes on and go home. You're done here anyhow, you know? And he did. But, I also got word to the guy that was running. I'm like, this guy might be a problem. I don't want him waiting out there for my producer, or the cameraman, or something like that. So I don't know what happened to the guy, but it was kind of funny to watch this guy pleading and begging and then getting kind of violent about how you can't use this footage. But the rest of it was just it was a shit show. It was ridiculous. It's like I was it's not on my bucket list to be on a porn set, but I was on a porn set and it wasn't even a porno. It was a gang bang, anal gang bang. So, just the worst of the worst of the worst to be there amongst them. And there's video where you could see me in the background occasionally here and there. And that was my concern too. I'm like, I don't want to, I hope I don't end up because it was being filmed. It was being turned into a porno. So we're there and the porn, like I never saw the porno. I don't know. I might be on it though. You might see me standing in the background. It might look like I'm watching or something, but I'm really just standing right next to the producer because that's my job, and watching our camera guy and making sure no one's like messing with them. But
Wow.
that was that's my story. And I thought that story would have won standing around 50 homeless guys pulling their junk for 6 hours. And I'm surrounded by them. And
Yeah.
like I said, it smelled like a filthy hockey gym bag,
Yeah.
gear bag. I just got to paint the picture of the sense, just everything else that was going around. It was bizarre. It was like, it was bizarre. But
So the
again, I think
guy,
Sherlock had it tougher than me, I think.
the guy that was like freaking out, had he already been in there with her and this was the
Yeah.
first interview?
Oh
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
why he's freaking out. I see. Okay.
Yeah. He wore his Phantom of the Opera mask. Remember, he was one of the guys that had tube socks on because I guess the floor was cold, so he wanted to keep his feet warm. And he went and he went out there for more. These guys went out there more than one time too. This went on and on and on and on. I don't know how many they used 50 guys, but I don't know how many sexual acts she wanted. I don't remember it, but there's some porno out there that's I'm sure can be found somewhere. And you might see, I think we had bowling shirts one year, and I believe I'm wearing like a Jerry Springer bowling shirt,
That's
security
great.
guy shirt.
I would say that probably tops Jimmy's story, not gonna lie. Like to me at least. I think that's that pretty much tops. I did not see that coming at all.
Yeah, it was the experience I didn't need. And I painted the picture obviously about me being sick because I wanted to be in bed. I mean, we've all had the flu, so you can imagine. I'm running a temperature. I've got a terrible sore throat. Um, and I'm just fried. I'm just like completely like burned out. But I got to stay there. I got to stay until the producer is ready to leave. And then we went and shot something else all night long too. So that was a very long day. But, I was in it for the money and I was paid well. So well enough. None of us retired, you know. Um, People are like, I could share it. My biggest year at the Springer Show, I think I made $7,500. That was it.
Really?
And I was
Wow.
probably for maybe I worked like 60 shows or something like that. There
Wow.
might have been one year that was bigger, but it always hovered somewhere around that.
Yeah.
The only guy making money was Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were making money. It wasn't bad though, and then when I would do the extra stuff, where if I had to hang out with a guest all night, and that happened more than once, Richard had me hang out with some guy, got his heart broke really bad on the show, and he just wanted him to have a friend. So I took the guy out for a burger. We shot some pool, had a beer, you know, and he was so distraught that I ended up staying outside his hotel room all night in the hallway. And because Richard asked me if I could do it, I said, "Yeah." I go, "It's gonna suck."
Wow.
And
That's terrible.
he told me he was gonna pay me, and I said, "Okay, all right, I'll do it." And
Oh, a lot of things for money, right?
right. And then Richard, the next day, Richard really wasn't a really nice guy, and he created something kind of, but he's a good guy. They're all good guys. I got nothing but good things to say about that guy. Um, it came out on the show that and everybody laughed. The audience laughed. His wife had hocked, or his girlfriend had hocked his shotgun, right? And it was an heirloom shotgun that I think his grandfather once owned. And this is a real humble guy. Like he was one of the guys, like he was there because his girl wanted to announce that she was cheating on him with somebody else. So he didn't. He was just a really nice guy, and he was blindsided by all this. And I can remember the audience laughing when because Jerry repeated it. So she sold your daddy's shotgun. And everybody laughed, and I didn't think it was funny because I know how expensive and the sentimental value in something like that. So she had pawned it. And so the next day, when Richard and when I'm back at the office before we're going to send the guy home, uh, Richard's like, let me ask you something. That shotgun, how much do you think you think you can get it back out of that pawn shop? He goes, I don't know if it's still there. Somebody else could have bought it. And he goes, well, how much would it cost you to get that shotgun back? He goes, I think minimum 1,500. If I remember correctly, I think it was like an antique Benelli. And Richard wrote the guy a check for $1,500 out of his personal account right there. And he goes, well, you do what you have to do. If you get that shotgun back, if you can't get that one, maybe buy a new one, start your own heirloom, you know. And that was a nice story. I hung out with that guy, let him know that not everybody's trying to make a fool out of him or ruin his life or whatever that woman wanted to do to him, embarrass him on TV. Audience laughing at him. He left the show thinking that, we're not so bad, and Richard included. Like I said, Richard bought that guy a shotgun,
That's
hopefully.
really good.
Yeah.
Again, you would have never even known that had
No.
you not told me that. I mean,
Yeah.
that really speaks volumes to Richard for
Yeah.
sure.
Even asked me to hang out with the guy. Just take him out, see what he wants to do. And that's what I said to the guy. He was just a humble guy. Maybe he's a couple years older than me, but not much. Just a simple man. That's what he was. And a guy had a job and he was a hunter. He hunted. I got a lot of buddies that hunt. And but he had his heart broken. And I think that it was more of the humiliation. He was embarrassed, he was embarrassed. And it doesn't make up for it, but taking him out, having a beer, and just talking to him, just like, because he kind of felt like he thought that you know, the show was behind, what was happening to him. And it's like, you know, the only person that is to blame is the person that wanted him on that show and wanted to embarrass him in front of everybody and make this announcement and all this. It's like the show, it had really decent people that worked on it. I'm not going to say everybody, that's just not true anywhere. But the security and with Richard definitely cared about people. Like I said, even when I left the show, he wanted that he was trying to incentivize me. What can we do to get you're a big part of this. We want you to stay. And I said, it's not that. It's like I have to make a decision now. It's like even if they had quadrupled my money, it still wouldn't have made sense because it was in direct conflict with a real career I had. And this was just something fun that started in 1994, I think. And at this point, it was just time for me to, move on. And that's what I did. And then I do like that Pete, they all say it like I was the one that I came up with the idea for Pete Kelly to get that job. I
Yeah.
told that to Steve. I said, this guy's fantastic. He's a badass. He could take care of himself. I've been watching him fighting a super cop for the last 6 or 7 years, I mean, and he was knocking everybody out. And but he's a real serious cop and he's a great guy. He's very photogenic, as everybody knows. And I think Jimmy might have known him too. But I remember Steve goes, "What do you think?" I said, "I think he's a natural. He does some acting, and again, he's going to fit in with everybody here because he loves to laugh. He's like, he's like you. You guys are gonna be cracking each other up nonstop. That's what it's gonna be." So I had nothing to do with him getting the job. I think all I did was really vouch for him, and I put it in Steve's ear, and Steve's married to Rochelle, the executive producer of the show, so they wanted somebody decent and Pete and Jason for sure. And I don't think I knew the other guys. I don't know who else that they brought. I didn't know any of the other guys that worked with those two guys. But
And I think when they went to Chicago, not Chicago, when they went to Connecticut,
yeah,
they only brought Pete and Jason on.
yep,
They would fly them out there. The
yeah,
rest of those guys, when they went to Connecticut, were like local retired cops from
yeah,
Connecticut, New York.
yeah,
So,
yeah. But it goes to show you that, and how, I mean, I imagine that these guys were flying the same day. They'd go there, they'd fly, and then sometimes they flew back the same day. And, it's like, it's what, 2.5 hours or something like that. Just travel, but the show wanted them because one, they could be trusted, you know, um, and and they're professional guys at the end of the day. On top of it, they're never going to get the show jammed up in any way and you can trust them. And that doesn't just mean to keep your mouth shut about stuff. But because that's part of it too. I mean, uh, it's important. That's why, like, I try not to even say names of anybody. I don't want to, Again, it just kind of goes. Cops are like that, and even somebody like me is like that, where, um, you know, keep things private that need to be kept private. There was always somebody talking somewhere, though, but it was never security. I think that,
yeah.
and there wasn't any big secrets. I'm not saying that anything bad,
Okay.
but it just, what happens at work stays at work.
That's right. I feel that way now.
Keep your mouth shut.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you doing
I
this.
hope so. Thank you.
Um, can I ask you to stay on for just 5 more minutes
Yeah,
after I stop recording? I wanted to
sure.
talk about some stuff that's not
Yeah,
part of this.
sure.
But like I said, thanks so much for all your stories and your time. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Uh, I mean, thank God I didn't have to work with Kelly and Brandstetter because those guys are pricks, man. Been lying the whole time about how cool they are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
Oh,
curious to see what they'll have to say about
they're
that.
awful. They're awful human beings.
Good.
Fantastic guys. Fantastic guys.
Yeah.
So, in all seriousness,
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
is. Might as
Good
well.
times. Good
I
times.
love all those guys. Fantastic guys.